Present.
Member Scholes,
Present.
Executive Director Miguel Ness,
Present.
Legal Counsel Rita Hartshell. We'll be back in a few minutes. You can
Okay.
stay right there.
I think the first order of business is to appoint a chair. So do either of you guys want to serve as chair? Yes, no?
Well, but if no one wants it, I'll take it.
You want to, I mean, I know you did a lot of work on this, so maybe you should
Well, I'm
serve as
number
chair.
one. I'm happy to do it if you guys.
Okay. I mean, I would appoint Commissioner Giacavone, nominate just Commissioner Giacavone as chair. Second, okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it, and Commissioner Giacavone will chair the meetings.
All right.
Going forward.
Thank you. So we have a short agenda today. The first order of business is to talk about the compensation committee and the topics that we're going to be addressing. With the first one, item number one is we may discuss and vote to develop recommendations for the adoption of compensatory time policy for board employees. And just as a reminder, this is how this whole committee got started in the first place. Was actually almost 18 months ago now. I think we started talking about that policy. So I think it's important that we define a policy. I think I had shared one at the beginning of last year. Unfortunately, right now I can't get into my state email account. I think it's in there. So once I do that, I will share it out with reshare it with the committee members. And I think at our next meeting, hopefully we can dive in deep and talk about the specifics of that. It's nothing earth-shattering. It was based on basically the Department of Administration's HR policy. And I also looked at the Secretary of State's Division of Elections policy, kept those with minor changes. So, but we can review that at the next.
I mean, I think that's a great starting point. From my perspective, I do think we need to recommend something to the board. I don't know, is there an existing policy now, Miguel?
To my knowledge, nothing written.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's one of my concerns is, I mean, for having nothing can be an issue in a number of ways, but most for employees, if for example, there's a different executive director decided that there's no such thing as comp time, then that doesn't protect the employees who we know during election time put in a lot of extra hours. So I want to make sure that that's part of, and I think that's just the goal of the policies as they exist in other places.
Dave, I mean, you pre-exist both of us. Do you know if, like what the general rule is or has been?
But there's been an unwritten policy that has been in effect for a number of years. And it's been passed on from one executive director to another. Because this is an extraordinary board department here.
Okay.
Because they work long hours in a very compressed period of time. And we really can't afford to pay them overtime
Right.
for all those hours. So in effect, it's been comp time to allow to spread out that cost over the year, especially during the times of the year when there's no work here.
Okay.
So I think we're glad to put that down into some sort of writing to give guidelines.
That'd be great.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can do that, then we'll have a couple things to at least go by and make some recommendations.
Yeah. So I can share those with you for the next meeting. Okay, item number two, the compensation committee may discuss and vote to make recommendations for the adoption of modifications of job titles and compensation of the staff. Just as again, background on this one, when we had discussed the idea of a policy of some HR related policies, I know there was some concerns that, and there's been an ongoing concern that some of the job titles here match other places, other state jobs where they really are unique jobs to the state infrastructure. And so they definitely are worthy of their own titles, their own job descriptions, which they have now, but job descriptions dealing with the elections, as well as I think having a compensation study done on those new job titles. I think the executive director probably can provide us some background in the past. I know something has been done in this vein, but I'd like to see something more formal put together that we can make some recommendations to the state for making some changes.
Sure. So based on my limited knowledge, because I was not in this role when this was done by the previous director. However, you do have some familiarity with it based on discussions with him during that time and afterwards, in terms of our positions here, our titles here are generic titles that are shared with other state departments. So a planning and program development specialist at the Board of Elections is the same as a planning and program development specialist at the Department of Labor or whatever of the various departments within state government. So there really is not a specialization to the role in the position titles, whereas a department like the Division of Taxation, Department of Revenue, they will have a seasonal, they'll have a tax specialist one, tax specialist two, or where this is someone that obviously is not going to be working in Department of Human Services if they're a tax specialist, because their positions are unique to their department and what their roles are. So the goal, since that, as Commissioner Jack Boney mentioned 18 months ago, is to try to get specific titles that various other departments do enjoy and do not have to rely on the pool of just generic department position titles. Last year, if you remember, we attempted to submit legislation, the board approved legislation that the previous director, Bob Raposa, had worked with the Department of Administration on in order to obtain that goal, achieve that goal. And it did seem to gain some traction in the General Assembly. However, at the end, it was determined that the legislation would not achieve that goal when it was run by the Department of Administration again. Although we did work with the Department of Administration on drafting that legislation. So going forward, we would need to look at that legislation again with the Department of Administration to determine what does need to be done in order for the State Board of Elections to get its own unique titles, where we would go before the unclassified pay board, for example, and create these titles and retitle the positions that are currently here into their new titles. In that way, the Board of Elections would have more direct control over the titles and salaries of its own employees, and that will not affect any other employee with that same title in a different state department. That is a long-term, I believe that's in the best interest of the agency.
So Miguel, is that a process you could get started with the Department of Administration to start those conversations, just to understand the mechanics of what we have the input of the actual detail, but we need to know the mechanics of how we'd actually get it done.
Correct. And that has changed over time, what we've been told. So I would have to look through the records from what the previous director had worked on with, and then reach out to those contacts in the DOA to determine what we would need to do, either legislatively or administratively to get that done.
Do you feel that whatever Mr. Raposa had worked on gives you enough detail, like the current job titles, what the future job titles should be? And does that include job descriptions, and was comp estimated by the HR?
He handed me a rather large folder when he left.
All right, that's a good sign. A lot of
So
detail.
yes, I do have a lot of details I can go through.
Okay, maybe for the next meeting, we could just discuss, because to me, that seems like the logical step. List the current job titles, what the future job titles should be based on what the executive director recommends, and then get the compensation estimated by HR. So that would be my recommendation.
So Miguel, the titles and the descriptions and the job titles would be unique to our office,
Correct.
to this department.
Correct.
And, well, maybe that's something we can actually present to Ray as well, if we have the authority to go before the unclassified pay board without that legislation, and just do it based on a, board vote, or something this committee recommends to the board, and maybe the board adopts. And I'm not sure what the unclassified pay board wants at this point in time. I mean, I haven't dealt with them for probably 20 years, so I know at one point, the departments had the ability to do that. I don't know if you still do, or if they're going to require some type of legislative action.
There is a process that the Ray and the previous director had gone through. And I believe that was something that was on the table, but then it turned to, the discussions turned to legislation being needed. So I have to go venture back into those discussions with the DOA to determine at the end what we need to do.
Great. So it sounds like for item number 3, compensation committee may discuss and vote upon agenda items for the next future meeting. I think for the next meeting, we add one back on number 1, which is to discuss the actual compensation time policy, and then add a second agenda item for a report from the executive director on what he's found to date. Anything else that we would?
Just maybe some action on that if he's got some.
Sure.
If there are detailed positions and we can do it, just we might be able to even act on that.
So essentially
Start.
putting 1 and 2 back onto the agenda for the next meeting.
I think we're just in the process of gathering facts at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Then that concludes our agenda. Any other points of discussion? If not, motion to adjourn. Second?
I think it's good we're getting started.
Yeah.
You did raise it several months ago, so I'm glad we're getting started.
I
I know
am
it was
too.
tough, it was an election year and, it
Yes.
was hard to do during that year, but I think it's important.
Do I have a second to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.